it sure is nice to come home at the end of a long day and enjoy a podcast. But you know what makes the experience that much better? Relaxing with a few puffs of smoke from my McQueen pipe. At McQueenPipes.com, I was able to find the perfect smoking pipe to suit my nerdy, yet dignified sensibilities. I especially love that each pipe is designed and handcrafted by a true artisan, and that all of their pipes are inspired by fantasy books and movies like The Lord of the Rings. Being a bit of a hobbit myself, my pipe is called the Barrel Rider, but they've also got pipes for wizards, rangers, dragon riders, or even goblins. If pipe tobacco isn't your thing, no worries. McQueen Pipes has got you covered with attachments for vaping or even cannabis. Head on over to McQueenPipes.com and use the code BIOGRAPHERS at checkout to receive 15% off of your entire order. Go ahead, treat your nerdy heart to something you'll cherish and enjoy your podcast listening experience in style with a McQueen pipe. That's Mac like mac and cheese and Queen like the band. McQueenPipes.com and use the code BIOGRAPHERS at checkout for a 15% discount on your whole order. Cheers, everyone, and happy podcasting.
I do hope you can see me today from where you are.
Ich bin ein Feeling.
If I'm generally anything, I guess I'm generally miserable. This modern world of science and invention is of particular interest to women.
The people, I would say, there is no patent. Would you patent the sun?
I regard myself as a soldier, though a soldier of peace.
Welcome to the Biographers.
To be fair, companies want to optimize their time, where they're like, hey man, we're paying for you not only to fly out here, but we're paying for your hotel, we're paying for your food, so we're going to maximize what you're going to be a part of or whatever. So yeah, like I said, I'm both looking forward to it and not, and mostly just because I had that trip to Philadelphia 3 weeks ago or whatever it was. So like the thought of like, oh man, pack my suitcase again, then get to the airport and then fly again. It's like,
I'm sure Kat's kind of sick of it too.
A little bit. And because for her too, it's like we have both of the dogs, and so we have to hire like a dog checker on her, whatever, to come in the middle of the day. Because he's just a year old.
Is Kat coming with you on this trip or no? No. She
would genuinely be alone 20
the whole time. Yeah.
Whatever hours a day, 18 hours a day, because it's like the entire day I'm in meetings, and then at night we have like team activities that we're doing. So yeah, it's very, very regimented, and
I think it's not going to be any fun for her to go anyway. So
no, and I mean I had even kind of said that about Philadelphia because she was kind of curious about maybe her coming to Philadelphia, and in retrospect it was like, well, you could have come. I was gone most of the day, but there were like 3 or 4 hour chunks here and there that I could just go chill at the hotel room. The nights were free. There were minus one night where I had to kind of do like a company dinner thing. All the other nights I was able to go out and do stuff. So that was cool. And I told you all about all that, right? About the cool.
The fact that you stayed at the Ritz and got to go and get these like sick Philly sandwiches that were mob owned or something like that.
Something, I don't even know. Yeah, Uncle Gus's, that was delicious. And anyways, no, it
sounds like a mob place.
It was a good time. But like I said, I'm both looking forward to this trip and not, because more that I'm just tired. That's all. It's like I'm looking forward to the actual trip, seeing my coworkers, all that good stuff. But the idea of staying home and just like chilling, is also nice. So,
Totally.
Cool. Well, hey everybody, welcome to the Biographers. I'm Daniel Newman, hanging out with Akiva Miola.
What's up, y'all?
And we're about to get going on to Mark Twain Part 6, believe it or not.
Yep.
And it is, for everybody out there that's wondering, it's like as I progress in all my research and stuff, it's winding down in essence because, like we've said many times in many other biographies, usually, there are exceptions to the rule, but usually our subject's life is the most exciting between childhood to like maybe 30. And then it's sort of like 30 to 50 or so. There's this sort of like pensive phase where they're a lot more
You're
settled down,
yourself,
right? Like the oats have been sowed, right? And now it's like they're finding peace. And that is in essence the case with Mark Twain, but there is plenty more to cover. So
Yeah, because he's a slightly more of a late bloomer than the rest of the characters that we've covered.
he is. Yeah, I mean, in the last episode, we talked a lot about The Innocents Abroad and how that was really his first smash hit novel. It's really what established him as a force to be reckoned with in the world of literature, and kind of, put his name into the history book sort of a thing. So, but that being said, we do have plenty more to go. But just before we get started, like always, everybody, if you are enjoying the show and you want to support us, it actually does remind me, before I even go into that, our Patreon page, patreon.com/thebiographers. You can throw us a couple of bucks. And the reason that I hesitated just then is because I was like, oh yeah, that's right, we had a new subscriber, and I wanted to say thank you. Let me grab my phone really quick. Yes, so I actually told you about this person because they emailed me, us. It is Katie Ann Skosberg. And Katie Ann, I'm so sorry if I'm butchering your last name. I'm trying my best over here. But she is a PhD neuroscientist and a professor of college that teaches neuroscience. And she reached out to us schlubs saying we are making her like history, which to me is about the most flattering thing anybody's ever said to me, maybe in my life. That
was probably one of the nicest emails that we've gotten so far. Thank you so much, Katie Ann. That was really incredible. And it's so cool to see that folks in academia are also finding some enjoyment out of this, because to me, I feel like we're hitting the mark for people who weren't able to get into academia for life reasons and now are interested in history. But it's cool that there are people who are actively working in the field of education, actively working at colleges, who are really enjoying this stuff. So once again, thank you so much. That was so nice.
Yeah, and she also said it in her email initially when she reached out and kind of said history never stuck. It just wasn't something her brain wanted to absorb. And how we approach it was from the perspective of one single person's life experience as they lived history. And she said that's connected and made things stick. And I have to say, that is one of the reasons that I wanted to do this show, is because I always feel like history is this very and then this battle happened and that person killed this person and then that created this other spark of a thing. And it's it's this sort of sequence of events.
Of movements, yeah.
And I think a lot of times we forget that it's just, these are just a bunch of people, just like you and me, that were just going through a thing and experience different stuff. And I personally love learning it through this lens because it just, kind of shifts the perspective and gives it more real flavor, Yeah,
so, I agree. Like, a biography is, I think, one of the best mediums possible to learn about history, because not only do you learn about the day-to-day life of an individual, but just by the fact that they are alive during whatever time they're alive in, you're also learning about the larger, greater movements around them. Like Alexander Dumas, it would be impossible to talk about General Alexander without talking about the French Revolution, without talking about the rise of Napoleon in France, right? Totally. And those are things that we covered in our history books, and often I would consider one of the most ignored parts of the average high school American history lesson is the French Revolution, sort of that time period where everybody's wearing, gold buckles and those little slutty shorts that show off their calves and the wigs that are powdered and all that, that's not a part of history that the average teenager is very interested in. But when I tell it through the lens of one individual, it's like I'm talking about, did you hear about so-and-so the other day? I heard that he did, it's just a regular almost conversation that allows you to sort of see the greater, macrocosm of it all.
100%. So anyway, we've waxed poetic for long enough.
Yes.
But Katie Ann, again, thank you so much for your support. Really, really do appreciate it. And then final thing before we jump into the episode here, if anybody's feeling generous and happy and you want to give us a nice review somewhere, please do so. You can do that on Spotify or on Apple Podcasts. We would really appreciate that as well. Alrighty. So you ready, buddy? We're going to get going here into Mark Twain Part 6.
Yeah, let's do it.
All right. So last time, we saw a 31-year-old Mark Twain finish up his pleasure cruise through Europe and the Middle East with a wealthy and self-righteous group of Christians. After writing articles about his experiences for roughly 7 months, he would be tapped on the shoulder to write a book, and about 2 years later, Mark Twain would have his first novel published, titled The Innocents Abroad, or The New Pilgrim's Progress. It would prove to be a smash hit and mark the turning point of America, which would fully embrace the humorist as a respectable and illuminating voice. Now, along the way, Sam Clemens would also find his true love in a woman named Olivia Langdon, or Livy for short. After marrying in February of 1870, the two happily settled into their life together, and less than a year later, they had their first child, a boy named Langdon Clemens. Much like Sam, Langdon was born premature and sickly, and many doubted the child would make it. But where we left off last time, Mark Twain was in the thick of his newest writing project, which would be titled Roughing It, and gearing up for a new lecture tour while Livy was pregnant with their second child.
Also, it just occurred to me, the kid's name was Langdon Clemens. That's just both of their last names, right?
Correct, yeah. So her name was Olivia Langdon, so they named him Langdon after Olivia's family, basically.
Oh, that's cool.
Which is cute.
Yeah.
And it also is a good name. It's funny. Like, Langdon is a nice first name, you know?
Yeah. Well, it's also like, when you think about Mark Twain, it's almost like an homage to both of the names that they lost. Because, like, Mark Twain is not very often referred to as Sam Clemens at this point, right?
Not by the public at large. Like, even friends in the following years, really from this point on, if anybody ever wrote about him and their personal experiences with him, they would say Mark Twain. Almost always. It's in the after research, so in like the main biography that I'm using, if there's ever a quote from a letter or a description or a newspaper article, somebody will say, and then Mark Twain, and then the biographer that I'm reading will insert in parentheses Clemens.
Sam Clemens, yeah.
So like we are connecting it, weirdly enough.
Yeah.
But yeah, he is definitely like...
He's Mark Twain to almost everybody.
Almost. Now, obviously, like his family and stuff, even to Olivia, he's the youth. She rarely calls him Sam.
Yeah.
You know, like that's her little nickname for him is, oh, you youth, like you boy kind of a thing, which is also adorable.
Still very cute.
But yes, I said it literally at the very opening of this entire series. It's like a man of many names. He continues to prove it. Like he just has 1,000 other names. And Sam Clemens is one of the most forgotten out of all of them. But anyways.
Funny enough.
Now, his new lecture tour was to be called Reminiscences of Some Uncommonplace Characters I Have Chanced to Meet. Yeah.
Just rolls off the tongue.
It's like such not a good title. By comparison, especially to his last one, which was American Vandal, that's just like sharp as hell.
Yeah, that sounds like something that would go out today.
Yeah, dude. Literally, like, I think it was less than 10 years ago, there was a fake documentary series that Netflix made. It was like a joke kind of thing, and it was called, I'm pretty sure, American Vandal. So, like, and most people probably didn't realize that was technically an homage to Mark Twain, or at the very least, he coined the term American Vandal, which is kind of cool. Anyhow, it would be Mark Twain's first true failure on the lecture scene. Upon debuting his new lecture, critics would say he was neither entertaining nor instructive, and that he was, at many times, inaudible, which is really uncommon for Mark Twain. He was, like, mumbling sometimes almost. They also complained that he was reusing material from his American Vandal tour. So, not instructive, it was inaudible, it wasn't entertaining, and he was recycling material. It's like, ooh, like that's a recipe of bad.
Just bombed it, yeah.
Yeah. Now, we can't get too mad at the poor guy, though. His firstborn son's health was touch and go. His wife was recovering from the birth along with a bout of typhoid fever, and his father-in-law, whom he loved dearly, had died just a few months prior. So he was going through some stuff.
Yeah.
Now, it's safe to say that his heart just wasn't committed to entertaining audiences right now. Despite this, however, the tour was still a commercial success, and he did manage to sell out most of the places that he performed. So it's kind of like a modern-day comedian. Even if the set isn't the best, if they're popular, they're still going to sell out the crowds. Yeah. You know. Now, back home, Livy was lonely. She missed Sam and was heartbroken on a daily basis as she watched her baby boy Langdon, now a year old, struggle to even sit upright without help and cry almost constantly. He just wasn't doing good.
Jeez.
Much like Sam, after watching his younger brother Henry die, Livy's once unwavering Christian faith was beginning to fade. When Sam would write letters to Livy, all he could bring himself to say about his son was, quote, "Kiss Cubby for me." Like, even he couldn't even get himself there.
Yeah.
It was almost like he could sense the impending heartache and didn't want to grow too attached. Now, Livy tried to keep her body and mind busy, but only so much could be done. In Livy's letters to Sam at the time, you can feel the undercurrent of pain, the anguish of a woman barely keeping her head above water as she writes, quote, "Oh, youth, Langdon is such a delight to me. I am so thankful for him. If anything happens to me, you must love him awfully. I hope that I shall get a letter from you tomorrow morning. I do like to hear from you, little man, because you know all about it. Do you pray for me, youth? Oh, we must be a prayerful family. Pray for me as you used to. I am not prayerful as of old, but I believe my heart prays. Mother and I went to church this morning. It is so long since I have been to church that I was mellowed by the very atmosphere, I think. Mrs. Warner was speaking this PM of lukewarmness towards God. I told her if I felt toward God as I did toward my husband, I should never be in the least troubled. I did not tell her how almost perfectly cold I am toward God." She's struggling.
Yeah.
Now, to occupy her mind, Livy began to design a house to be built in Hartford, Connecticut. It would take the better part of 2 years to design, but Livy was so brilliant that when it was eventually submitted to architects, very little needed to be changed, and her drawings would serve as a functional blueprint during construction.
Wow.
So she just naturally was like, yeah, I'm gonna build a building. Like, and we said in the last episode too, she would casually study chemistry and philosophy.
Oh yes, I forgot. She was like a really big thinker.
So she is brilliant. And I think that's one of the main reasons that Sam was like, I love this woman, is that she wasn't like the simple sort of like, no, I just want to, of the day, right?
Yes.
I just want to go shopping and blah, 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 blah.
As Mary Wollstonecraft would have considered a toy.
Exactly. Livy was very much like, no, I'm going to use my mind as much as I can, Didn't
she say in one of the letters last time, I am the suffrage or something like that?
I am women's suffrage, yeah.
I am women's suffrage, yes.
Now, as Sam continued his lecture circuit, he retold his poorly received talk and began to focus more on stories from his current novel in progress. The tales from his days in the Wild West had audiences laughing once again, much to Sam's relief. Then, as Sam made his way through a rural part of Illinois on a Sunday morning, he popped into a small chapel for Sunday morning church. Something about the tiny town, tiny church, and quaint occupants stirred a deeply held but often forgotten corner of his memories. It was almost like a fever dream. He was taken back to Hannibal, Missouri as a boy. He would write a letter to Livy that evening saying about his experiences, quote, "It was the West and boyhood brought back again vividly. It was as if 25 years had fallen away from me like a garment, and I was a lad of 11 again in my Missouri village church of that ancient time." He went on, describing the church scene like an artist painting a landscape, saying, quote, "The 3 or 4 old white-headed men and women bent forward to listen intently. The deaf man put his hand up to his ear. A deacon's eyelids drooped. A young girl near me stole a furtive look at a photograph between the leaves of her hymn book. One boy got out a peanut and contemplated it, as if he had an idea of cracking it under cover of some consumptive's cough. Another boy began to catch imaginary flies. The boys in the gallery began to edge together with evil in their eyes, and the engaged couple in front of me began to whisper and laugh behind a hymn book and then straighten up and look steadily at the minister and pinch each other clandestinely. She was a bright, pretty girl of 19, and he had his first mustache. These two did nothing but skylark all through the sermon. It was such a pity to think that trouble must come to that poor child, and her face wither and her back bend, and the gladness go out of her eyes. I harbored not a critical thought against her for her unchurch-like behavior. Lord, it was worship. It was the tribute of overflowing life and youth, health, ignorance of care. It was the tribute of free, unscarred, unsmitten nature to the good God that gave it. The missionary appeal concluded. The sexton and the deacon went around, while the choir wailed and collected 70 cents for the carrying of glad tidings of great joy to the lost souls of further Indiana.
Wow.
It's like
I'm
this
right
little,
there. I'm
right?
100% right there. Like imagining this stuffy church and like this overtone of like kind of mundanity, and then like watching kids try to just quietly break free of that. Like they're not quite ready to just, like you said, bow their heads and droop their eyes.
Right.
That's so great. He just had it, and he had his first mustache was like totally like took me back to being like, 18, 19.
Totally.
And like when I met Shalana or whatnot, that's great.
But it also has this lovely sort of feel, like it's not without this funny sense of remorse. And this is what I said at the beginning of the episode of like, there's a pensiveness that starts to occur where prior to this, I feel like Sam Clemens was very just sort of devil may care about everything, but he's now, I think, becoming aware of his own mortality. And he's seeing these things of like, he's like, I love watching this little couple over here hopelessly in love and like poking each other and giggling and then covering their faces with their little hymn books and everything. And he's like, and it kind of breaks my heart thinking that one day this like lovely, happy girl here is going to grow old and grow sad, and the joy in her eyes is going to go away. Like there's this heaviness to it at the same time.
Yeah.
And I don't know. And this is one of those things, by the way, that this letter, it's longer than this, but for a long time, nobody was really aware of this letter. And to my knowledge, it was in like the 80s or 90s that this sort of surfaced, and people started to go, oh my gosh, this is one of his like actually weird little masterpieces. But it wasn't ever published or anything. It was just this unbelievable little nugget of his mind in a very specific place,
Yeah.
So anyway, just really cool. And I wanted to include a nice big chunk of it because it's just good flavor,
Yeah, I mean, it's fantastic. It's kind of like, Shalane and I have always like debated about kids, but one of the best arguments that I've ever heard towards having kids these days is that as you get older and as you stop feeling invincible, you stop feeling like a rock star, you get to watch this thing that grows an inch every day and heals cuts, in an hour and gets scraped knees and doesn't mind and jumps off of monkey bars and feels fine and does all of these things. You get to watch this kid feel invincible, and that kind of reminds you about like smaller, simpler joys in life. And I feel like Sam is both happy to see it, but also sad that he's not in it. And I think that's just, I don't know, it's fantastic.
Yeah, might be. And it was through this whole writing, it was almost like Sam had just discovered for himself that he wasn't just a good humorist writer, he was a good writer, full stop.
Yeah.
Now, the spark of a book idea cracked into life in his heart. But then that night, something else would happen that would shape the way he would tell stories moving forward. As he sat down in his hotel room, there was a knock on his door. It was dinner. The door opened, and a little black child walked in named William Evans, carrying the tray of food. He was only 7 years old. And for no particular reason, Sam asked him to sit down and have a chat. Little William was a chatterbox and ended up talking to Sam for about an hour. Just like in church that morning, William Evans made Sam remember something he had almost forgotten. All those long hours he had spent as a child in the slave quarters, listening to Uncle Daniel tell ghost stories and hearing all the other enslaved people speak in a way that almost felt like a code. Sam started taking furious notes, copying William's speech as closely as he could. Now, I'm going to read some of this, but it's important to remember that this wasn't a joke to Sam. Okay, this was capturing an important piece of America, showing white Americans something that they chose to ignore and that Sam thought was really beautiful. Now, here's some excerpts from the 1,800-word sketch that Mark Twain would eventually title Sociable Jimmy, Jimmy being an alias for William. So it goes a little bit like this. Mark Twain, quote, "Did you have a pleasant Christmas, Jimmy?" William, "No, sir, not exactly. I was kind of sick then, but the rest of the people, they had a good time. They all got drunk." Mark Twain, I should think that if you had asked the doctor, he might have let you get a little drunk." And William cuts him off. "Oh, no, sir, I don't never get drunk. It's the white folks. Them's the ones I means." And hopefully this is not an offensive way to speak. This is literally how he writes it. Okay.
Yeah. No, I'm taking this from the historical perspective of you trying to read an excerpt, because and I will just, for anybody who's starting to have their hairs go on end, what I see Twain as sometimes is like an early version of a cultural anthropologist.
Correct.
Who's taking a genuine interest in the dialects, the common sayings, the cultural items that we take for granted that other people have really strong significance towards.
Correct.
And trying to put a spotlight on it, and just like you said, in a way ignored. So yeah.
Yes, and I think you made it about as clear as it can be, but it really was, from his perspective, this was important because in literature especially, capturing how Black Americans at the time truly actually spoke. It didn't follow the rules of traditional grammatical language, right? Mm-hmm. And it would feel really unnatural if William Evans's response was, "Oh no, sir, I don't never get drunk. It's the white folks. Them's the ones I mean." Like, that's not accurate. That's not how they were actually speaking. And so this whole thing, I'm going to read more of this, but Mark Twain basically saw this and went, this is not being represented correctly anywhere. Nobody is actually writing realistically about how these interactions happen and how Black people speak, how white people speak, and the differences between the two. And that was his intent, was to capture that as an idea. So again, this was not a joke, nor was this any type of a condemnation or making fun of or anything like that. This was a genuine, like, this is actually how these people are speaking, and I want to actually make people understand that and capture it. So
yeah, it's important to remember that we're right now getting close to the middle of the Jim Crow era, right?
Yeah, not even. We're still a ways out or whatever. We are only a couple years out of the Civil War. Like,
oh, true. Yeah. So, any depictions of AAVE, African American Vernacular English is what the stands for, is going to be either extreme caricatures used for honestly comedic and pretty rude purposes by white folks, or, like you said, anglicizing the way that they speak so that people can, quote, understand them. Whereas, Black folks have an easy enough time understanding one another, so obviously that there are rules to the system, which is why we call it AAVE, right? It's a whole linguistic study right now, and I think Twain is trying to sort of capture that.
Yeah, and I would almost compare it, like, if you go over to the UK and you listen to some Scottish people talk, even today, you're like, what the hell did you just say? It's almost like they're speaking in a code because their accent is so thick. Mark Twain is trying to capture that as well. And for anybody that's not familiar, go and look up how he actually writes. And if you copy and paste it into like a Word program, all of it is red. All of it, because none of it is spelled right. There's bad punctuation everywhere, but it's in a way that you read it and go like, I know exactly how you're saying this. Like, that was one of his true gifts, was his ability to write in this way that made you go, I can hear your accent through the words themselves and how you're putting it on the page. It's incredible to read.
Because only an idiot would think that, Mississippi English is the same thing as East Coast New York English is the same thing as England English. These are all different dialects. These are all different vernacular systems. And the same thing happens with Black folks out in the South, too. It's a vernacular system,
100%. So I'm going to go on here. William continues to talk, and he describes the family of his landlord, saying, quote, Bill, he's the oldest, and he's the best, too. There's 14 in his family, all boys and gals. Bill, he supports them all, and he done never complain. He's real good, Bill is. All them brothers and sisters and his and ain't no count, all excepting that little teeny one that fetched into milk. That's Kitsa. She ain't only 9 year old, but she's the most ladylike one in the whole building. You don't never see Kidda running and charging and a-kicking up her heels like the rest of the gals in this family does generally. That was Nan that you hear cutting them shines on that piano a while ago. And sometimes, if she don't wrestle that piano when she gets started. There's 14 in this family, sides the old man and the old woman. All brothers and sisters. But some of them don't live here. Though Bill, he supports them, lends them money, and pays them debts and helps them along. I tell you, Bill, he's real good. They all gets drunk, all except Bill. The old man, he gets drunk too, same as the rest of them. They's all married. All the family's married, except some of the gals. There's 14. So again, this was like Mark Twain genuinely sitting down.
It's also really cool that Twain can sort of code switch in this way, where like he can write in the Queen's English, he does write in a Western style of English, and he's able to have a conversation using AAVE at the time.
Yeah, and he's also, I think this is one of the things that made Mark Twain so distinct in his writing, is that we talked about this in the last episode too, of how American writing for 100 years plus was trying to emulate European and English writing.
Yeah.
This was Mark Twain being like, I'm not interested in that. I don't want to write in eloquent, beautiful English Shakespearean prose.
That's not how we talk here, yeah.
Right. I want to write in a way that we understand in America, right? And that actually has representation across a lot of different places, not just black folks, but we'll see in things like Huckleberry Finn. Huckleberry Finn, he writes the character of Huck Finn in that kind of, I think what they call Pike style accent from South Missouri. Mm-hmm. So he has this really amazing way of capturing different characters and different voices, and it's through these ways of writing. And when he talked to this little kid, William Evans, he was like, holy shit, like, this is what I've been missing the entire time, is like, I can write about all these other people. I can write about, Southerners and whatever, but like, this is half of the South. And if I'm not actually writing these people, I'm not even doing the South justice to like show what this is, So anyway, again, hopefully nobody was pissed by my sort of strange accent there. It was weird for me too, so don't feel too bad. Now, what struck Sam so deeply wasn't just the language and dialect of William. It was his childlike way of saying things and his childlike way of seeing things. He bore no malice towards anyone or anything. He saw things as good and happy, and there was a certain limit to this child's ability to understand the world around him. And for Sam, this was huge. He knew that moving forward, if he was ever to write from the point of view of a child, he didn't just have to write like one, he needed to think like one and see the world through their eyes. He would write of this experience to Livy a few days later, saying, quote, I think I could swing my legs over the arms of a chair and that boy's spirit would descend upon me and enter into me. So he, like, again, to emphasize the point, it was not him being like, oh, this is hilarious. He was like, dude, I think I have a weird, like
this kid's got soul and I want to represent that.
Yeah, with this boy, like, and the culture. And I think he was being reminded of his times as a little boy listening to these old slave stories and being like, this is amazing, and connecting with it deeply. So anyway.
No, I think I understand like your nervousness to represent this, but I just want to say,
it's a tough time to say something like this, in our current climate.
Yeah, but I want to, at least, from my one mostly white guy talking to another almost entirely white guy, my perspective is, I think this is, you're exactly hitting the nail on the head here. I think the people upset about this generally aren't understanding the point that you're trying to make, which is that for almost every other English writer who is representing AAV at the time, it's a joke, versus Twain is accurately trying to represent the genuine, intelligent, worldly soul of this kid who's talking about the goings on in his day, and he doesn't see, oh wow, that's such a fun character. He says, oh wow, that really reminds me of me as a kid.
Yeah,
exactly. That's how I talk. That's how I hung out. That's what we talk about. So-and-so's getting drunk, but this guy's real nice, and they all got 14 kids, and this one's married, and he's like, this is incredible. This little kid just like told me this whole life story and all of these things. So once again, I just want to assuage any nervousness there. I think that was a really great representation of what Twain was trying to shoot for. Good.
And I would also probably just add one other tiny little thing, and then we'll move on, I promise everybody, which is that I would imagine too, and I'll have to research this more to actually know if this is true, but I'd be willing to bet there were not many, if any, actual black writers at the time who were able to write in this way. Even somebody like Frederick Douglass, I would say,
wrote in Queen's English.
Exactly. And I think that was on purpose, where he was like, I'm trying to get away from this concept of having like slang talk.
He's also writing to white Americans,
exactly,
to appeal to their moral compass.
That's the exact thing. Is he is trying to write to appeal to white Americans, and I think Mark Twain was and this is not a indictment from Twain's perspective, but I think Twain was going, I need to make sure this is not forgotten. I need to make sure that this is actually shown.
And not ignored. Yeah.
And not ignored, right? So again, I just think it was an important thing that he was trying to do, and we'll talk more about this kind of idea as we get into some of his other books coming up here. But he continued to push through his exhausting lecture tour as 1870 rolled into 1872. The year was off to a grand start. Sam and Livy were expecting the arrival of their second child, and Sam had received the first copies of his soon-to-be published book, Roughing It. Now, even little Langdon was doing well, with Sam describing him at the time as, quote, very fat and chubby and always cheerful and happy-hearted. Like, very fat and chubby. That's how cute. I think they would describe me as a child.
I mean, who wants a skinny baby, right?
Nobody wants a skinny baby. Like, it's very true. But by March, more than 30,000 people had pre-ordered copies of Roughing It, and a month later, Sam received his first royalty check of $10,500, which would roughly translate to $278,000 in today's currency. That's in pre-sales.
Holy damn.
He's doing all right. Now, even better still, on March 19th, 1872, Livy gave birth to their first daughter, whom they named Olivia Susan Clemens, or Susie for short.
Cute.
Baby Susie was also born premature, weighing only 5 pounds, but this time both she and Livy were doing great. 1872 was poised to be a great year for the Clemens family. But life is rarely so kind. On May 27th, just one day after baby Susie was baptized, Langdon caught a cold. The cold soon turned into diphtheria, and for the next month, little Langdon developed a cough. His breathing became strained, and his body grew weak. On June 2nd, 1872, at 9 o'clock in the morning, Langdon Clemens passed away in his mother's arms. He was only 19 months old.
That is brutal.
Brutal, dude.
Oh my God. I mean, we've done so many biographies at this point, and this is just a fact of life before modern medicine, but it doesn't ever get any easier to hear about.
No.
Oof.
And especially when you really start to get into a person's life, it's one thing when you watch, even, again, I hate to keep making these comparisons because it sounds like I'm dogging on Ken Burns, and I am not. The man is a hero to me. But even in his series on Mark Twain, it was like, Langdon was born at this time, and he was always sickly and would only make it to 19 months old, and it was heartbreaking. And it just doesn't give you the
full breadth of,
of this thing of being like, no, dude, there was a whole year and a half where they were with this boy, in love with this boy, raising this boy, high hopes.
Worried about this boy.
Taking care of him as much as they possibly could, for it all to fall apart and for him to die in her arms. And it's just like, dude.
19 months is long to be attached to a kid like that, too.
Yeah, man.
I mean, for the mother, add another, 9 on top of that from being pregnant. And that's 2 years, basically, or over 2 years of hopes and dreams put into this kid.
Oh, I know. It's horrible and super sad. Now, Livy's grief and depression was so great that those around her, including Sam, feared for her life. Remember that less than a year ago, she had also lost her father. Livy would write around this time, quote, I feel so often as if my pathway was to be from this time forth lined with graves. Heavy.
Yeah.
Thoughts of suicide were even creeping into her brain. Sam, true to form, blamed himself for the death of his boy. He would later cite his reasoning. When Langdon was sick, he took him for a carriage ride to get some fresh air, and at one point, Langdon's thick blankets fell away and exposed his legs to the cold air. Now, though this probably did very little in affecting Langdon's health, it was enough for Sam to now carry the burden of his only son's death.
Man.
He just can't not blame himself for the death of a loved one around him.
Your kid's legs getting cold is not gonna But,
and
know,
it's
a psychological thing.
Even how he described it, I think it was like he noticed, and it was like for 2 minutes. For 2 minutes, the blankets fell away from his legs, and that was enough for Mark Twain to go, I'm the reason. Even though my boy already had diphtheria, I'm the reason that
You pushed it just a little bit further, and then that was it. Yeah.
Right. He even like kind of described it as like malicious. He was like, was like trying to kill my son? Like, it was not good.
His brain's not a calm place. Twain is not a person who doesn't think ever. You know, when he's awake, it's always churning. And it's exactly like with his brother with the accident with the steamboats.
Yeah, exactly. Now, over the next few weeks, Sam tried his best to mask his depression, but through the pain, something else began to emerge. Probably dreaming of the life his son would never get to live, he began to write small portions of a book that focused on the carefree and magical times of boyhood, filled with friendship, fun, mischief, and love. Ugh, goosebumps for me personally.
Yeah.
Now, about a month later, Roughing It was released, with reviews and sales being positive across the board. Sales were pretty good, but not quite as good as The Innocents Abroad. In the first year, Roughing It would sell some 75,000 copies, and Sam would earn some $22,000 in royalties, equating to about $582,000 in today's currency. And this was great news, as Sam had big plans for living arrangements in the future. Not only were he and Livy planning on building a house in Hartford, Connecticut, but Sam also wanted to find a winter home abroad somewhere. He was torn currently between Cuba and England.
So different. Okay,
very different, but he was like, one of those two would be a good place to go, kind of a thing. Uh-huh. Now, he settled on England, not only because he wanted to get inspiration for a new book, but also protect his intellectual property. Apparently, England had quite the reputation for printing his books without permission, which meant Sam wasn't seeing a dime from English sales. And shockingly, this technically wasn't illegal, as there was no law in England prohibiting the practice. International copyright law would not be established in England until 1886.
Wow.
So at like 14 years from now, basically, would finally get established. Pretty wild.
I mean, and also what, Mary Shelley? Yeah, that would also mean that Mary Shelley, which totally makes sense because she didn't make a ton of money off of Frankenstein. Lots of people were probably printing her books as well.
100%. Yeah, all over the world. And these laws didn't really exist. So, and to be fair, I might even mention it later on in the writing, but America, it was the same situation where they would reprint English books because there was no law prohibiting them from doing it either. So it wasn't just England that was the bad one. It was like everybody was kind of doing it and it wasn't cool, you know?
Gotcha.
But the thought of a company profiting off of his hard work while he received nothing was infuriating to Sam. And for the rest of his life, he would fight for authors' rights. So on August 21st, he boarded a steamship in New York and was headed for Liverpool. Bit of a dick move, if you ask me. His son had just passed away only 2 months earlier, and his wife did need him. But,
wait, the wife wasn't coming along?
No.
Oh, dude.
But I do suppose, in a way, it was his way of working through his grief. He just wanted to keep his mind busy, if I was to give him any kind of...
Yeah, he definitely seems to be somewhat of an avoidant type when it comes to stuff like that.
Yeah. And his mind was indeed busy. As a quick little side note, Sam had recently dreamt up a scrapbook that had pages covered in dried glue, where all a person had to do was wet a portion of the page with water and attach a picture or newspaper clipping, and you could automatically build out a scrapbook, which was really popular at the time.
Huh.
Now, he would patent this idea the next year, 1873, and by 1885, he would earn over $200,000 in profit from it, roughly $6.7 million in today's currency, and would remain in production until 1902.
What?
So yes, ironically, everyone, it was not a book he wrote, but a book with blank pages that would be the most successful book of his lifetime.
That's hilarious.
Unbelievable, right?
What was the name of the product? Do you know?
For those curious, it was called Mark Twain's self-pasting scrapbook.
That I would love to have that, by the way. I would absolutely love to have that because Shalane and I have been trying to scrapbook for forever, but yeah.
Super cool. So yeah, that was his whole thing. He was like, people love scrapbooking, and it's so annoying to try to like put glue on the back of something and then try to put it onto the page. He was like, if you could just take a little brush with water, brush up a little area on the page, and it activated the glue and you could slap something onto it. He was like, that would be great. That was literally what Mark Twain's self-pacing scrapbook was.
That's so funny.
Now, after arriving in England, he took a train from Liverpool to London to meet with a publishing house who had been publishing his work and began the process of both negotiating with them and charming them. Maybe not surprisingly, his wit proved to be a savage weapon against the Brits, who laughed hysterically at his toasts and anecdotes. Soon, the British press caught wind of his presence in England, and they were eating up his every move. He was a party everywhere he went, and the Brits just couldn't seem to get enough of his charm and wit. In the cacophony, Sam managed to secure some money from one of the publishing houses, and though the other publisher that was stealing his work didn't stop stealing it, he did die just 1 year later. So, silver lining?
Win-win.
So the other guy only profited for an extra year before he died, so that's kind of good. Regardless, Sam fell in love with England. The people, the beauty of the landscape, the old world architecture, it all felt so romantic. For Sam, this first trip would spark a lifelong love of England. But the trip could only be enjoyed so much without his beloved Livy. He wrote to her often and with tender affection. And something I really love about Sam and Livy Clemens, and I mean this sincerely, they were straight up horny for each other. We talked about this a little bit in the last episode where I was like, I think Livy like got laid and was like, oh my God, I'm so chill now. Like, but like, I mean that genuinely and sincerely, like, they really were. So at one point, Livy wrote to Sam saying, quote, "How sweet the memory of all our love life is. Often when I get to thinking of you, I would like to have a good cry. A happy, thankful cry it would be, but at such times it is hard not to be able to put out my hand and touch you. Last night I had a vivid dream of your return. In my sleep I did all the things I should have done waking if you had returned to me, everything that should make me really conscious of your presence." She basically was like, I had a sex dream about you last night, bro. Where I did all the things that a wife does for a husband. Like,
wow.
Basically, in the most, like, I know, Gilded Age way of saying it.
Yeah, I mean, but the message came across clear.
Oh, I know. It's loud and clear. And this next part is, to me, maybe even better. Sam would write back to her saying, quote, "You may have observed that I do love to go to bed and lie there steeped in the comfort of reading. And I have observed that you will not permit a body to get any satisfaction out of that sort of thing, but you always interfere." Wink, wink, nudge, nudge.
Ooh.
Basically like, sometimes I just want to read a book in bed, but you won't let me because you want to bang.
That's crazy. Good for them. Good for them.
That's what I'm saying. I'm like, I'm. It's obviously funny, but like, it is good to hear that this couple in this like slightly stuffy time are like, dude,
really finding genuine enjoyment out of one another.
Exactly. Like,
yeah,
actually being physically super into each other. That's great. That's
also
awesome.
Kind of rare with like upper crust marriages at the time.
Exactly.
Like, I mean, that was like Mary Wollstonecraft, and the whole reason that Mary Wollstonecraft and William Godwin were like, we're going to be polyamorous and we're going to be this and that because marriage is basically shackles to somebody that you don't want to bang. And these people are like, actually, no, we definitely want to.
Yeah, no, they were very much into it. They loved each other's company. Wink, wink. So as the end of 1872 drew near, Sam was once again on the hunt for a new book idea. For some time, he had been toying with the idea of writing his first fiction novel set in the high-class social circles of the modern times. Around Christmas, Sam and Livy were having dinner with some friends, Charles Dudley Warner and his wife Susan. After dinner was over, the four sat around chatting, and before long, Sam and Charles took to making fun of the modern-day novels that their wives were prone to reading. Susan and Livy responded by saying basically, "If you think it's so easy, why don't you write a better one?" The two women snapped back even further, jokingly pushing Sam's buttons by saying that The Innocents Abroad was an accidental hit, given that it was all based on real-life experiences. So, like, they were like, "Oh, you think it's so easy? And by the way, your book that was so popular actually happened to you. You just wrote it down. This wasn't, like, fiction that you made up or whatever." So, like, they were, like, teasing him right back, basically, you know?
Like they're, like, reading A Court of Thorns and Roses, and they're like, "Oh, well, you think your book is so much better?" Like...
Exactly. That's honestly, like, the best comparison is that the guys were like, "Oh, yeah, you like your silly, like, romantic porn, basically."
Romantasy.
Right. Now, Sam and Charles looked at each other and basically said, "Okay, fine. Let's write a better one." So over the coming weeks, the two couples would meet up, with Sam and Charles taking turns reading sections of their book, asking the women if they could identify who had written it, kind of like a little game of like, did Charles write this or did Sam write this, right? Mm-hmm. Now, it all started out as a joke, but the two men soon realized the work was actually pretty good and was an astonishingly accurate representation of the times, along with the current state of, oftentimes, corrupt politics. Maybe they thought, this really could be a book. So like Arnold Schwarzenegger and Carl Weathers clapping hands at the beginning of Predator, Mark Twain and Charles Dudley Warner joined forces and began to write.
Hell yeah.
They started in December of 1872, and by June of 1873, they had collectively written 574 pages, making up 63 chapters. The book was to be titled The Gilded Age, a tale
I had a feeling
of today, and would begin its publication in December of 1873. Now, though the story was fiction, Sam would draw heavily from his own life. For example, the story begins with a family moving from Tennessee to a small town in Missouri, with the patriarch of the family called Judge Hawkins. Remember, his dad was a judge.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. And there's this whole point of contention throughout his life with his brother Orion of like, the Tennessee land, we've got to sell the Tennessee land. And Orion was like really apprehensive. They came from Tennessee. So that's where this came from, this whole idea in the Gilded Age book. Okay.
I see. That's cool.
There is a point where the family survives a steamboat explosion. Ringing any bells? And there's even a cameo appearance by a fella named Uncle Daniel.
Wow.
He actually wrote Uncle Daniel into the Gilded Age.
That's cool.
Now, Sam was starting to get in his rhythm. After this recent step into the world of fiction, which drew heavily from his own life, he began to write more bits of his book that focused on boyhood. We kind of teased at that a little bit earlier. Now, by early 1873, royalties had started to flood in from Roughing It. So Sam and Livy decided to pull the trigger on a dream they'd shared for several years, to buy a plot of land in Hartford, Connecticut, and build their dream home. So they did, and the house would be built according to Livy's own designs, though the architect they hired would give her no credit. So I am not even going to mention that architect's name. And he was a very famous architect. He was like one of the biggest, most famous architects in America at the time. Yeah, nope, no mention of you on this one. So leaving that one alone.
That's funny.
Now, with the land purchased and the construction of their new house underway, Sam and Livy, along with baby Susie, decided to take a trip back to England. Upon arrival, Sam took to showing Livy the gorgeous landscapes and high-class lifestyle in London, and Livy loved it. It was her first trip outside the U.S. She was especially thrilled when she got to visit Stratford-upon-Avon, home of her favorite writer ever, William Shakespeare. And it was a surprise. So Sam was like, we're going to go on a little trip today. And Livy was like, where? And he's like, don't worry about it. And so they just hopped on a train, and they get to this place, and she's like, wait, where are we? And he was like, we're just in a little town. Takes her over and is like, you know who was born here? She was like, who? Bill Shakespeare. She was like, what? Like, like so excited.
That's
it's
so
her favorite.
cool.
Now, funny enough, Livy had no idea that her husband would one day be called the American Shakespeare.
That's kind of wild.
It's so cool, dude.
Yeah. It's also hilarious that she's not her favorite writer isn't her husband, but instead is Shakespeare.
I mean, it's Shakespeare. Like,
but I mean, yeah, I guess
come on,
that's
like,
fair.
It's hard to hard to get around that. But after 4 months abroad, which included shorter trips to Ireland, Belgium, and Paris, Livy got homesick. So the two decided to head back to the US, but not before Livy discovered that, once again, she was pregnant.
Damn.
Once back in the States, The Gilded Age was published, the first fiction novel ever to be sold as a subscription, and the first American book ever written that was considered political satire.
Huh.
Which is crazy to me that Mark Twain wrote the first political satire book.
That doesn't there's no way that feels right? It has to be somebody else.
I mean,
I know
there were other books that were made around before that had elements of satire to them, but more of the time than not, they were actual direct criticisms of politics. Right. So,
yeah, you're right.
Common Sense and stuff like that. It's like, oh, are we to believe that this and this? You're making like sarcastic remarks about actual politics. This was like, there's this whole story that like interwoven throughout the entire thing were these like political things that were like, he's taking direct jabs at politics and the state of corrupt politics in this very satirical kind of a way.
Yeah.
So, yeah. But the critics just weren't ready for it, and some of the reviews were downright harsh. Now, sales weren't too bad, but Sam didn't really seem to care all that much. To him, The Gilded Age wasn't a personal story, so its success didn't really affect him. He was much more interested in his wife, his growing daughter Susie, and his continued efforts to drive his mother, Jane, crazy. By this point, Jane was getting pretty old. And in one letter she wrote to Sam, she accidentally wrote, "Kill Susie for me." She meant to write, "Kiss Susie for me." Sam seized the opportunity to wind his mother up, writing back, quote, "I said to Livy, it is a hard thing to ask of loving parents, but Ma is getting old, and her slightest whim must be our law. So I called Downey, their servant, and Livy and I held the child with tears streaming down our faces while Downey sawed her head off."
Oh my God.
So brutal, dude.
Oh my God.
And apparently Jane totally took the bait and for days would randomly just shout, "Sawed her head off?" Oh my gosh.
I just, yeah, it's so great to tease your mom, you know?
I was laughing every single time that I had to, like, I was proofreading through all of this. I was like, that is one of the funniest. It's so brutal and so like, Jesus Christ,
I
dude.
guess we have to.
Yeah. It was like, I think it was his way of being like, that's what makes it so funny. It's like almost like Anthony Jeselnik, you know, who's like, it's so fucked up that it gives you this visceral, like, oh, Jesus, dude. Like,
yeah,
you're not supposed to say that. Like, if he had said anything less, if he was like, so we did as she pleased and our daughter is now deceased. That doesn't hit the same way.
No.
So, like, sawed her head off is so
yeah,
like,
it's like being like, yeah,
Lord.
they died from a bus exploding on top of a train in an airplane.
Yeah.
You know, like, it's just outlandish, right?
Yeah, I thought that one was amazing.
That's killer.
So Sam mostly stayed at home, performing lectures on occasion, but he was growing tired of them. In March of 1874, he would give his last live performance for more than 10 years. He and Livy's dream home was still under construction, so they opted to spend the summer back in Elmira to be close to Livy's family. By this point, some 240,000 copies of his 3 published books had been sold, and a good thing too, as he and Livy's dream home was already accumulating a bill for $40,000, which is over $1.1 million in today's currency, and that number was still growing.
They are loaded, dude. I mean, after all of these like successes with even like the books that didn't sell very well, he's still making hand over fist.
He's making good money, and then remember, Livy had got like a $7 million inheritance from her father passing. Remember? So they're not doing too bad. Now, something I haven't mentioned yet is a place called Quarry Farm. Now, Quarry Farm was a large piece of land owned and occupied by Livy's sister Susan and her husband Theodore. To both Sam and Livy, Quarry Farm was like a second home for them. And it was there they would spend most summers soaking in the tranquil, idyllic countryside with Susan and Theodore, who both loved having Sam and Livy stay. And at this point, little baby Susie, too. During the late spring of 1874, Sam, Livy, and baby Susie all came to stay like usual. But during this trip, Livy's sister Susan had a little surprise in store for Sam. Susan led Sam and Livy about 100 yards away from the main house and up a set of stairs made from natural stones. At the top of the hill, overlooking the city of Elmira and the river Chemung, I'm pretty sure as you say it might be Chemung, that ran through it, sat a small octagonal cabin of sorts with a pointed roof and windows on all sides. Inside the cabin was a small fireplace, sofas, chairs, and a writing desk. It was all for Sam. Susan figured that if Sam was going to be spending most summers here, he needed a proper place to think and work that was quiet and removed from the hustle and bustle of the main house.
That's cool.
It's so cool. Sam loved it, would spend countless hours in the cabin, and it was from this cabin that he would write some of his most famous works. Of his sister-in-law, Sam would write, quote, "Susie Crane is an angel, and it is such a comfort to me to know that if I do chance to wind up in the fiery pit hereafter, she will flutter down there every day in defiance of law and customs of the country and bring ice and fans and all sorts of contraband things under her wings." It's a cute, like, thought.
That's very cute.
He's like, while I'm burning in hell, she's going to bring me ice and fans. And if anyone is in Elmira, New York, or the whole area, you can visit that small cabin, which is now on the campus of Elmira College. And afterwards, you can play a round of golf at Mark Twain Golf Course.
That's cool.
Pretty cool. Now, with a glorious new hut from which he could think and write in peace, Mark Twain started to make more and more progress on his novel about boyhood along the Mississippi. Then in June, Livy gave birth to their second daughter, whom they named Clara. Unlike the previous two children, Clara came right on time and weighed an impressive 8 pounds. Sam was so thrilled, he wrote to a friend at the time saying, quote, "I wish the nations of the earth would combine in a baby show and give us a chance to compete." But little did Sam know, baby competition would be fierce. Also born in 1874, Winston Churchill, Harry Houdini, Gertrude Stein, Robert Frost, Ernest Shackleton, and a legendary baseball player named Honus Wagner.
Wow.
Big year for some big names.
Huh? Winston Churchill. That's so weird. I guess there is overlap, yeah.
It's weird to think of him being born in 1874, but then you think about it, in World War II, he was old, you know?
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
So, now with his family all doing well, Sam began to write more than ever before. He was even in the midst of writing a play based on the Gilded Age. In reality, he had caught wind that someone out west had stolen his material and turned it into a play, which ended up doing really well financially. So Sam had obtained the rights, rewrote the play to his satisfaction, and was now planning on staging it in New York. But what most occupied his mind was his book about children growing up on the Mississippi River in Missouri. This one was special to him, and he told no one what he was doing or that he was even working on a novel. If anyone asked what he was working on, he would pretty much chalk it up to memoirs of his youth, and he wasn't lying. Most of what he was basing his new book on came from his own memories. Hell, even the main character was based on him. But eventually, he hit a bit of a mental block, which he referred to as his tank running dry, and set the work aside for the better part of 9 months. Then, in late June, Sam would hear a story at Quarry Farm that would shake him to his core. Now, something to know about Susan and Theodore Crane, Sam's brother and sister-in-law, was that much like Livy's parents, they were born staunch abolitionists and advocates for equal rights of Black Americans. And so much so that any workers they employed who were Black were invited to sit and talk with everyone, really at any time. So like after dinner, they'd be like, hey guys, come on, hang out and talk with us. So like it was a very welcoming, open space.
Egalitarian sort of,
Yeah. Now one afternoon, as Sam sat on the front porch of Quarry Farm, he got to talking with the cook, a woman named Mary Ann Cord, whom everyone affectionately called Auntie. Now, Mary Ann Cord was born in 1798, had been a slave for most of her life, but was known for her constant cheeriness and boisterous laughter. On this particular evening, Mary Ann was in rare form, cracking up loudly and covering her face to muffle her laughter. Sam was having a great time too, and thoughtlessly said, quote, Auntie, how is it that you've lived 60 years and never had any trouble? Mary Ann stopped laughing and got quiet. She looked Sam dead in the eye and said, quote, Mr. Clemens, is you in earnest? Sam knew he had hit a nerve and fumbled a response, saying, quote, why, I meant, why you can't have had any trouble. I've never heard you sigh and never seen your eye when there wasn't a laugh in it. She turned to fully face him and said, quote, has I had any trouble? Mr. Clemens, I was going to tell you. Then I leave it to you. Mary Ann then proceeded to tell Sam about her life, how she was born into slavery, how she married a loving and kind husband who she loved, just as Sam loved Livy, and with whom she had had 7 children that she loved the exact same way Sam loved his kids. How in 1852, her slave owner was going broke and decided to sell all the slaves on the property. As she told this part of the story, she stood up, and Sam said it felt like she was towering above him. She said she and her family were sent to Richmond, Virginia for a slave auction. They were all put in chains and placed on a high platform. She watched as hordes of white men perused through her family like cattle, poking, prodding, and squeezing various parts of their bodies and proclaiming that, quote, this one don't amount to much, or this one's lame. First, her husband was sold. Then, one by one, her children were auctioned off. Mary Ann became hysterical with sobs, pleading for her children not to be taken. To this, a white auctioneer came over, slapped her hard across the face, and said, quote, shut up, you damn blubberin'. Finally, it was just her and her youngest boy, named Henry, who stood on the platform. Mary Ann became defiant and said she'd die before anyone took her boy. But then, little Henry pulled his mother close and whispered, quote, I was going to run away, and then I worked to buy you freedom. Then, Henry was auctioned off. Mary Ann's entire family had been ripped away before her eyes. She retaliated by beating several men nearby with her chains before being taken away to be whipped. Mary Ann would then spend the next 13 years as a cook for a Confederate colonel. Then, close to the end of the war, the Union Army overtook the town of her enslavement, which was New Bern, Tennessee. The Union soldiers were kind and told her she was amongst friends now. Then, a few weeks later, a black regiment of soldiers arrived at the house. And remember, this was 13 years had passed. That night, they had a ball of sorts. Everyone was dancing, and Mary Ann stood by watching. Soon, a young black couple were dancing close by, and as young people do, they started to tease Mary Ann about her outfit and the large red turban she had tied on top of her head. Mary Ann snapped at the two, saying, quote, get along with you, rubbage! The young man paused for a second, smiled slightly, and then went away dancing. As the night went on, the group of soldiers got a little rowdy, and Mary Ann felt that she needed to put them in their place, so she shouted, quote, I wasn't born on the mash to be fooled by trash. I was one of the old blue hen chickens I is. It was an old phrase her mother used to say, something she used to yell at her children when they were misbehaving. And the blue hen chickens thing, it's a reference to, I want to say it was Delaware specifically. But anyways, it was just this funny phrase, like moms often have these phrases that they say. This was the one that she yelled. From the crowd of soldiers, the young man who had teased her a little while earlier sat up straight and started to look at the ceiling as if trying to remember something. The next morning, Marianne was up early preparing breakfast for the officers. As she was pulling out a tray from the oven, she saw the face of the young man from the night before appear under her arm. He was staring her square in the eyes. Marianne froze. She began to shake as she stared into the young man's eyes before dropping the tray to the floor. She grabbed the young man by the wrist and pushed back his sleeve. There was a scar, just like her boy Henry. She put her hands on his face and pushed back his hair. There was another scar, just like her boy. She looked at him in the eyes again and said, quote, "Boy, if you ain't my Henry, what is you doing with this welt on your wrist and that scar on your forehead? The Lord of heaven be praised, I got my own again." As it turned out, Henry had indeed escaped his enslavement prior to the Civil War, but enlisted to fight when the war broke out with the sole purpose of scouring through the South to find his mother. When she finished, Marianne looked at Sam again and said, quote, "Oh no, Mr. Clemens, I ain't had no trouble and no joy." Whew. That was a really hard one for me to write, I'm going to be honest with you, and it's hard to read. It's really, it's a tough story, man. And whew, I'm like Misty reading it right now. It's very emotional. Needless to say, Sam was at a loss for words.
Oh, man.
By this point, almost all of his prejudices he inherited from his childhood had faded, but this story put the final nail in the coffin of any remaining traces of racism. Marianne's story opened a metaphorical floodgate of empathy for Sam. Up until now, yes, he was aligned with the ideals of emancipation and equal rights for freed slaves, but this was something else. He had never heard such a visceral story like this from the mouth of a former slave and had never really put himself into the shoes of someone like Marianne. He could imagine the feelings of helplessness and rage as his wife and children were sold off at auction, what it must be like to live in a world where everyone looks at you differently and how they will never really know what you've gone through. He was reminded of the time when he was a child in Hannibal, when he watched a slave be beaten to death in full public view and how nobody really seemed to bat an eye. He was struck even by the name of Marianne's boy, Henry, the name of his own younger brother who had died from a steamboat explosion. Marianne's final words had especially resonated. She said, "I ain't had no trouble and no joy." It was almost accusatory. The whole story was triggered by Sam asking Marianne, "How is it that you've had no trouble?" Marianne was basically saying to Sam, "I have never been allowed to be any trouble or have any trouble, and the same goes for joy." Something changed inside of him, and his view of the stories of his youth in Missouri would be changed as well. From this story, Mark Twain would be heavily influenced in the writings of his two most famous works that would endure for centuries to come. Writings that would become staple pieces of literature practically for every high school student in America: The Adventures of Tom Sawyer and Adventures of Huckleberry Finn. And that's where we'll pick back up for part 7 of Mark Twain.
I knew you were going to drop it at that. Ah, man.
And this story, by the way, Marianne's story, cannot be diminished in its importance to Mark Twain as a writer moving forward. We're going to talk a lot more about both Tom Sawyer and Huckleberry Finn, but like, again, it's one of those that like, there has been modern criticism of like, well, Mark Twain uses the N-word in both of these books. And it's like, that's true, but he doesn't do it because he's condoning it or that he likes it. He's doing it to illustrate a point
of the world that they were currently living in.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And again, when we get into Huckleberry Finn, there's going to be this whole thing of the relationship between Huckleberry Finn and Jim, the runaway slave. And I won't get into it just yet, but man, it gets really important for Reformation in America. I mean, I don't think it had a huge impact on Reformation, or not Reformation, but Reconstruction, pardon me. But I don't know. We'll get into it more. But it was, I think, like a lot of people have experienced, when there's certain stories that you hear, and even like we talked about at the very beginning of this episode when we were just chatting about biographies being really important to illuminate history. This is those instances where, like, you can talk all you want to about Reconstruction, you can talk all you want to about America healing from the Civil War and slavery, but until you get into these ground level stories of somebody going, man, when I actually talked to somebody whom I considered a friend that used to be a slave, who is nothing but happy and joyous or whatever, and then I actually heard their real life story. And by the way, that whole story, as lovely as it is, you still have to consider Mary Ann would never again see her husband or 6 of her children.
Yeah.
It's brutal.
Yeah. There was, it's not even a consolation prize for what she had to endure. Her
Barely.
Freedom, her being paid, her having egalitarian white, employers, none of it. There is no balancing that checkbook.
Yeah.
And I think this kind of speaks to now. A lot of folks think that we've gotten to a point where it's, we're done talking about it. Right. We've done the thing, we've done the work. Things are pretty much equal here. You can get a job anywhere. No one's going to stop you. But there is just no balancing that fucking checkbook. There's no way that you can make Mary Ann's story right. There's no happy ending, right? Because years of her life are, even if she found every single one of her kids and her husband, that experience alone could never be undone. Yep. And I think, Twain recognized that in that conversation, where they are laughing on the other end of it. They are enjoying, the present, the right now. And to see that history, to see the devastating consequences, I think, definitely like opened a, chakra for him, opened something up for him in a way that needed to be done.
100%. And if anybody is curious to read about this more specifically, I would highly encourage you to do it. You can find it online relatively easily. This would later be published in The Atlantic magazine, which is still in operation today. It was titled A True Story, Repeated Word for Word as I Heard It by Mark Twain. So this was actually a published story, and it was popularly received, and a lot of people were incredibly moved by it too. And Mark Twain insisted that the story is 100% true. The only thing that he did clarify to one of his publishers was that how the actual story was structured, Mary Ann told it differently. She was like, she kind of started at the end and then went into the middle and then the beginning and just kind of like hopped around and like piecemealing this story together.
Yeah.
So Mark Twain was like, all right, well, I want to publish this, so I'm just going to kind of move it around
chronologically.
In a way that makes it work. But like, as she was talking, when she finished, he was like, I got to write this down. And literally, from the best that he could possibly remember it, wrote down all of what she said. So this is not Mark Twain, making something up. Like, this actually happened. And he actually did talk to this person and knew her for a long time. And again, it just completely rocked him, as I'm sure anybody that would talk to somebody and hear this story, hopefully it would fucking rock you too, man. It's an absolute tragedy. I don't know what else word to use. It's devastating. And
and a lot of people get really uncomfortable because it's like it's so visceral that it just immediately puts a negative feeling in your gut of maybe perhaps a feeling of guilt.
And it kind of should.
And it should to some extent, but I think the important aspect of it is not to, what Shalane and I will sometimes call like sad porn somebody, right? Not to just like show them or present them with nothing but sad images and induce sadness, but to induce awareness, right? Yeah. It's the difference between making a movie about the Holocaust because the Holocaust is sad and making a movie about the Holocaust because the Holocaust happened.
Right.
Right. And I think Twain knows that. I don't know. That's great. That was really, wow, incredible.
Yeah. I had to. So again, if you want to read the actual story, please do. It's more from the point of view of Marianne. She actually is telling the whole story. And Mark Twain kind of writes it in that dialect, like we were talking about early when he wrote that Sociable Jimmy kind of a thing. So you get a lot more flavor from the actual mouth of this woman who told this story. But I wanted to not even go there because I wanted to tell the story in a way that was like, I'm just going to tell you without any flair or flavor,
exactly what happened,
hard facts of what happened in this poor woman's life. This, the actual life of what happened to countless slaves in America. So yeah, I'm not going to lie. There were a couple of times, like when I was even just proofreading it, trying to restructure it, that it was like, I was fighting back tears. It's, and I'd imagine Mark Twain was too, because it's just one of those stories you hear and just go like, shit, man. Like, I cannot even imagine how
it's a gut
devastating this whole situation must have been for anyone, right? So anyway, big important part of Mark Twain's life. And I think
I'm excited to see how that translates into his books that are coming up, Huckleberry Finn, Tom Sawyer.
It's, man, the Tom Sawyer, it's not as deep as Huckleberry Finn. Tom Sawyer, he had already written so much of it that by this point, that was the book, by the way, if you didn't pick up on it, I'm sure you did, but the whole thing of, childhood, boyhood, fun, mischief, love, laughter, all that stuff, that's Tom Sawyer. That's what he's been working on for the past year and a half or so. Yeah. And I loved hearing that it was when his son died, it was like, man, all of this childhood that I lived as a boy in Missouri, the carefree times, all I can think about is that my son will never get that. And that is one of the direct reasons that we now have Tom Sawyer. That to me is moving already. So then when he eventually goes to sit down and write Huckleberry Finn, that was where this story really starts to come into play. And he starts to work through the slow process of overcoming prejudice and racism. And that's kind of what the story of Huckleberry Finn is in many ways, but we'll get there, and hopefully y'all will stick around for it. First of all, how did you feel about this episode? Because for me, even as I was reading through it, I was like, I hope this is entertaining. I know it's a lot of just sort of stuff that happens. It's not as adventurous as the previous episodes.
No, I think that this episode is really important. It's exactly like you said, he's figuring himself out.
Yeah.
He's now gotten, it's like, it's going to be a weird comparison, but it kind of reminds me of like how things are going on in my shop, where like I, for the last year, have been collecting all of these materials and random bits and baubles and trinkets, and it just feels like it's a bunch of junk and I don't know what to do with it. And then over the last couple of months, I've gotten the inspiration to make things out of those materials. And I feel like that's exactly what he's doing with his own life, which is he has this list of experiences, he has this list of perspectives, and it's just been kind of sitting in a pile waiting to be assembled in the right order. And he's just looking for those moments of both introspection and also, as we just learned with Marianne, inspiration to try to put those things together. Right. So this is putting the puzzle pieces together. This is him realizing that the status quo of how he was operating, doing, stand-up tours or lectures, as they called it, was not really satisfying in the way that it was before.
Right.
And now it's time to look at the material that he's already accrued.
Right.
And organize it and send it out in a way that reflects who he is as a person now.
Yeah. I think that's pretty spot on. And he's also getting closer to his 40s, by the way, which I think if anybody, I mean, I'm turning 37 this year, right? I think anybody that is of this age or is older and has gone through this point in time, I think naturally you start to get into this slowdown and the adventure starts to die just a little bit. You're still yourself and everything, but you're like, I don't want to necessarily like raise hell everywhere.
Yeah. Oh God, this party starts at 9.
Yeah, honestly, he still did to an
yeah,
quite a few times. Honestly, he still was a bit of a party guy, but you can kind of feel it compared to like when he was out in Carson City and he was just like, dude, his day would start at like 3 in the afternoon or whatever it was, and all he would do is just like muckrake and then edit until 2 in the morning and then go drinking until 6. Like those days are gone, man. Like yeah. He's got a family now.
Yeah.
But anyways, again, I would very much encourage anybody out there who's interested to read the article by Mark Twain about this slave woman story, Mary Ann. Again, it's called A True Story Repeated Word for Word as I Heard It by Mark Twain. Again, you can find it on the internet. I'll also try to paste the link to it on our sources page on thebiographerspodcast.com. But with that being said, I think we've stretched out the episode long enough here, so we'll wrap it up here. Again, everybody, thanks so much for listening. If you want to enjoy, if you are enjoying the show and you want to support us, you can do so by going to our Patreon page, patreon.com/thebiographers. If you have any questions, comments, or corrections, you can shoot us an email at thebiographerspodcast@gmail.com. If you're feeling generous and you want to give us a little review, you can do so on either Apple Podcasts or on Spotify. We've been seeing a nice little uptick on Spotify. Also, things like comments. We love hearing from you guys. We've been hearing a lot more recently, so if anybody just wants to engage and chat with us, again, you can do so. And we're still at the point where we're not at like overwhelmed with emails, where we actually will email you back most of the time. So if you want to just chat and share some info, you absolutely can. Again, that's going to be thebiographerspodcast@gmail.com. As always, Akiva, give you a couple minutes to talk about metal stuff coming up. What's going on apart from your broken arm?
Yeah, well, both of my arms are currently under repair, thanks to some bad heavy lifting and a burn that I'm still recovering from. But I have all sorts of new classes from Hardy & Fuller. Hardy & Fuller is a blacksmithing shop in Denver. If you want to learn about knife making or blacksmithing in general, I highly recommend you check it out. We just added a Damascus class to the roster. It's going to be a 2-day class. The first day we make a billet of the steel, and the second day, depending on whether or not you plan on forging more, you can either make a second billet or you get to make a knife out of that billet you made in the first day. Sweet. And watch as all of those layers come to fruition in the final etch and the grind. It's amazing. We are adding another one. We've had it for a while, but it's going to be in regular rotation, which is the Higo no Kami folding knife class. This is inspired from my trip to Japan. These penny knives that have been made since the 1800s, these friction folder knives. You can make one in just a couple of hours over there. As far as purchasing knives, the holidays are coming up. Right now is the time to make an order, especially if you want something custom, pick your own colors or something like that. So check out metalworkbymiola.com and you can use the code biographers for 10% off, whether or not it's in stock or it's a custom order. Reach out at this point. Once it gets to December, it's sort of a crapshoot as to whether or not you can actually get it in by Christmas. So
sweet. Awesome. Well, again, everybody, Hardy & Fuller here in Denver. If you want to go and meet the man himself, do some awesome knife making, forging, blacksmithing, all that good stuff, sign up for classes. And then again, Metalwork by Miola. Use the code biographers at checkout to get 10% off your order. We'll leave you there, though, everybody. Thanks again so much for listening. And do remember, like always, ignorance is not stupidity. It is the absence of knowledge. And I do hope you all learned something today.
See ya.
You've been listening to The Biographers. For more information, please visit thebiographerspodcast.com.